This episode of Tutia Bruja is sponsored by Floodwitch, dedicated to providing information that helps you build an ethical witchcraft practice by raising marginalized voices while reclaiming weird. This is Floodwitch. Check it out at floodwitch.com.
I can see you clearly. Tutia Bruja.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Tutia Bruja. I'm Bex Carlos, your host. Thank you for bearing with me, everyone. I had a really difficult week last week, and I really just need a break. But I'm really excited. In that week, we charted in the UK and in Canada. So I am very pleased to see that people are still listening to the show. They're super receptive. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So today's episode, I had my friend Cheyenna Morgan on. Cheyenna is running for office in Oklahoma. I think sometimes we put so much thought and effort into these major elections, which obviously matter. I'm not saying they don't, but I am saying that we really need to build, our local government. And so we talk about some various things related to her campaign. We talk about some Indigenous practices. Let's jump into the episode. Cheyenna, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hello, it's me.
You have some big stuff going on in your life. You're taking part in a campaign. How did that happen?
So, before I decided to run, it was probably 2 weeks before. I'd been thinking about this for years, but the Black Lives Matter movement started really hitting Tulsa area, and what I've seen from my district has been a lot of inaction and just complacency. And I felt that as the city of Tulsa, we needed to progress that and have more diverse representation. Being an Indigenous woman gives me that advantage. So, yeah, I just wanted to represent minorities and people that have been left unheard.
There aren't enough people on the other side into office. So, there has been some change, but local government really is the backbone of anything. And I think so many people focus on the larger elections. What specifically made you run for the office that you're running for?
So in District 6, it's East Tulsa. East Tulsa is one of the most diverse communities in Tulsa. From what I've heard from people that have lived here for 20 and 30 years is that before the incumbent that we have now, Skip Steele, was very racist. He didn't like outside opinions, especially from the Latinx community, and he wanted to get rid of the food trucks that provide income for a lot of those communities, which was a no-go. So when Connie Dotson came in, they were really hopeful that she would be that voice, but she's a white woman, and she ended up catering to the older white senior communities, and they were left unheard, and she's been in office for 4 years now. Also, she had been the same thing as Skip Steele, just on a lesser scale.
That's the unfortunate reality is when a white woman is a politician, obviously white women are oppressed too, but, it is a hierarchy, intersectionality and all that. We've brought this up before, and it's something that continuously comes up on the show. Sometimes white women, more often than not, don't see their privilege and how they impact and hurt other people. So no, it's wonderful that you are taking it upon yourself to stand up for yourself and for other people who really need that. Oklahoma has a history. It's funny, we just did an episode of the racist history of Colorado and Denver specifically. And I know that Oklahoma, Tulsa specifically, has a large history of violence against brown and black people.
Yeah, it totally does. Before Oklahoma became a state, this was the area that Cherokees, Choctaws, Seminoles, and pretty much all of the eastern tribes were pushed to this state because, the country was expanding and they needed to get rid of the natives in that area. We had a few years before the land rush, and then in the 1920s, Black Wall Street became a booming neighborhood for the Black community. And then in 1921, a woman accused a Black man of sexually assaulting her in the elevator, and the white community tried to lynch him. So the Black community rallied and they tried to protect him, and it resulted in a massacre where the city of Tulsa legitimately bombed Black Wall Street, known as Greenwood today. Tulsa does have a lot of racist people in the city, and it's kind of hard to navigate that because it is such a diverse community.
Just like driving through Oklahoma, you can see all the issues and poverty. I drove through there once. I've only been there once. Just the amount of destruction and poverty that we saw, and especially we took back roads.
The town I grew up in Stillwell, had a article published in the Washington Post stated that it had the lowest life expectancy in the United States. So, yeah, I totally get that. It is one of the poorest counties in the state of Oklahoma.
Things like this are not going to get better until there are more people of color, brown and black people in office. And I mean, the system's all fucked.
Yes.
There's really no way to totally fix it, but I do truly think that in order to maybe possibly down the road make it a more ethical place, one, we need more brown and black people in office. Two, we need to get brown and black people on the same page where we can all kind of figure out all the things that we want. And there's so many different people, marching and protesting and demonstrating, and I'm all about it, but it's like, we just have to all figure out a way.
Yeah, totally.
And with doing that, I also think that people have to take the long, hard look and be like, all right, I have to be one of those people who help destruct the system from the inside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I also decided to run is what am I going to do from the outside other than yell and call people over and over again and not get our needs met? Somebody needs to be on the inside working to repair and dismantle these systems.
100%. Black Lives Matter. In the last 6 years, have you seen any major change with this movement in Oklahoma? Any positive change?
Yeah, there has been some positive changes, but all in all, there's a lot of work to be done. In Tulsa specifically, we've had coalitions built from the hardships, and we've had committees formed out of the mayor's office that have helped communities in North Tulsa and our minority communities. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Oklahoma City has done a lot more in terms of the movements. I know Norman PD have diverted almost $500,000 from the police department budget into community programs, and I was hoping that would have happened in Tulsa, but it didn't because there wasn't enough support here.
I'm glad that there is some change because there's so many different parts. Like the police are just one part of it, I will say that, there's been change, and, there have definitely been some fresh faces that have made it, just Congress in general, that really do give me hope. I know that recently, at a federal level, there was a win in Oklahoma.
The McGirt Supreme Court ruling pretty much states that Congress has never overturned the rights to the land to the government. So that land is still the 5 civilized tribes. It's still in their rule. So any person, any tribal member that commits a crime is subject to tribal and federal laws. They are not supposed to be tried by the state anymore. However, there's been a lot of conflict recently because there are some of the tribal chiefs, I know Cherokee Nation is one of them, that are slowly returning the jurisdiction to the states, which has been an issue with missing and murdered Indigenous women because when we asked for the states or cities to help in our searches for those women, they're unable to help because they say it's not in their jurisdiction. So overturning that is a big issue because we lose some of the groundwork that we had built for missing and murdered Indigenous women.
Indigenous women are one of the groups in this country that face the biggest amount of violence, and it's just not talked about, nothing's done about. It was a couple of years back ago, I know that there was a bill that passed that was going to probe an investigation into that. I don't know if anything came of it.
Yeah, so there has been some legislation passed on the federal level, but it has been mostly left up to the states to pass that legislation. I know in Oklahoma we've had Ida's law, I believe it is, pretty much stating that we would get special resources to help locate our missing and murdered Indigenous women. We should have a special task force involved in finding and prosecuting those murders.
It's such a harsh reality that the likelihood of an abuser just walking Do you do anything as a form of your practice to kind of stay in a balanced state? Because that's pretty heavy.
Yeah, so pretty much every morning I will smudge myself with sage. When that's not available, I'll use sweetgrass in the morning. If I use it at night, it tends to be an issue later in the night. For example, 2 nights ago, I had messaged you and I was like, "Are you up?" A spirit had knocked on the door. So I was just like, I don't know what to do. Yeah, but typically I'll smudge every morning when I can. I can't right now because of COVID times. I will go into Anipi, which is a cultural ceremony for purification. Most people call it sweat lodge. But yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about Sweat Lodge. Well, I guess what I'm curious about is I know that in the US, I think that people have fooled themselves about Indigenous people in a lot of ways. One, because they think that they're all like no longer here, the way that history books write it. And two, a border was created here, and it's like everything south of that border is now labeled Mexicans, but they were also Indigenous people,
Yeah.
at least with the group that you kind of do your sweat lodge. What are kind of the rules? Like, is it a very closed?
It is closed. You have to be invited in. You have to be also very careful about who you are going into the Inipi with, because if they come in with bad intentions or bad thoughts, that could make everyone else sick and affect their mental well-being as well. Anything that is discussed inside of the sweat lodge is very sacred. It is not to be discussed outside of the lodge because it is a purification ritual. You are pretty much cleansing yourself of all of the bad thoughts and bad spirits that are occupying your space.
Individuals focus so much on the blood quantum. And I've been guilty of that too, because I think it's definitely a way of separating people and being like, well, this is what is enough and this is what isn't enough.
Right. Yes, that is one of the most difficult things, is that natives have to register the fact that they exist, and it gets divided up into blood quantums where you have a card with a fraction on it and that says how much native you are. And if you're not over this amount of native, you're not Indian at all. That is a very difficult thing, and I myself have been guilty of, you're not native because of you're not this and this, you're not this quantum. So that has been a lot of work in dismantling those thoughts out of my head, because it's not about how much blood quantum you are, it's about how connected with the culture you are.
And that part right there, the blood quantum does not matter, but when you are using your percentage, which I see a lot of people do who are not tied to the roots in any way, are not actively making any type of strides to connect with that culture, sometimes people do a lot of harm. And I think that even though the blood quantum is not important, I think that it's like every person who has any ties to Indigenous roots and potentially worries that they're doing something harmful should ask themselves, but am I making the effort to be connected?
Right. That's exactly right.
One thing I do also want to ask you about is, what is your opinion on individuals who use white sage?
My opinion on that is, if you are not in the culture, it does not belong to you. It is an endangered species of sage. So I feel like need to reserve the commodities that we have in our own medicine for the people that actually practice that religion. If you are not indigenous to white sage communities, then it does not belong to you.
I'm with you 100%. And, it's not even about gatekeeping, it's about respect.
Yes.
Certain individuals in these metaphysical communities have not had the opportunity to just be able to practice safely without other people taking it.
Yes.
It's beautiful when something speaks to you, but if the people who are still practicing it can't do it anymore, then it's harmful. That's the big part that so many people miss.
Yes. Natives have had their religion stripped and torn from them, and whatever practices they still have need to be respected 100%.
Well, Cheyenna, thank you so much for being on the show. Where can people support you?
I'm on Facebook. My political campaign is Cheyenna Morgan for Tulsa. Just go facebook.com/Cheyenna Morgan for Tulsa, and you can find my donate link on there. It's pinned right on the top, so you don't have to look very far. Brochures and everything else is super expensive, so I appreciate any support anyone can provide. So, yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much, and it was a pleasure speaking with you.
So that was the episode. Be sure and check out the show notes for links to support Cheyenna Morgan. And also, if you're in her district and, you align with what she thinks, definitely vote for her. That election is on August 25th. Well, thank you again for listening. I really appreciate it. Be sure and follow me on Plutia Bruja's Instagram page. I pretty much keep updates, info, any giveaways, if we're not going to have an episode a certain week. I always like to update it there. So please be sure and follow that. You can also follow me on Instagram at BexBCaston. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you. I value you. You're the best. Thanks. Bye.
I can see you clearly. Oh, dear.